What if I told you that the sweetest smile can hide the darkest secrets? That the most caring touch can belong to hands that are plotting your destruction? Today, I'm bringing you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about love, trust, and human nature. This is the tale of a man who thought he had found his soulmate, a woman so perfect, so attentive, so loving that she seemed too good to be true. And guess what? She was. But this isn't just another story about betrayal. This is about a criminal mastermind who had perfected the art of deception over 8 years, turning romance into the deadliest weapon you could imagine. This is about millions of dollars, fake identities, international crime networks, and a game of cat and mouse where both players are hiding secrets that could destroy lives. What happens when a professional heartbreaker meets someone who might be even more dangerous than she is? What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted and the victim turns out to be the predator? Before we dive into this incredible true story, make sure to hit that like button if you're ready for a tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because stories like this one are exactly why this channel exists, to bring you the most shocking, unbelievable true stories that prove reality is always stranger than fiction. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at a perfect relationship the same way again. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will blow your mind. Let's begin. Picture this. You're scrolling through your social media right now, looking at profiles of people you barely know. Their perfect vacation photos, their happy relationships, their successful careers. But what if I told you that someone, somewhere, is doing the exact same thing, but with a completely different purpose? Meet Sarah Mitchell, at least. That's what she wanted you to call her. But Sarah Mitchell didn't exist 3 months ago. Neither did Rebecca Thompson, the identity she used before that. Or Amanda Rodriguez, the one before that. For 8 long years. This woman had turned online dating into the most profitable business you could imagine. And I'm not talking about a few $1,000s here and there. No. We're talking about $15 million. 15 million, stolen from 12 different men who thought they had found the love of their lives. But here's what makes this story absolutely terrifying. She wasn't some amateur scammer sending broken English emails from a random country. This woman, she was a professional. She had a system so sophisticated, so perfectly crafted, that it would make your blood run cold. Every morning she would wake up and check her shopping list, not for groceries, but for her next victim. She had spreadsheets, background checks, financial reports. She knew exactly how much money you had in your bank account before she even said hello on that dating app. And the scariest part, she looked exactly like the woman you would swipe right on. Beautiful, educated, successful. The kind of woman who would never need to steal from anyone. That was her greatest weapon. She had mastered the art of becoming whoever you needed her to be. If you loved dogs, she suddenly had 3 rescue puppies. If you were into yoga, she had been practicing for 10 years. If you mentioned your mother's birthday, she would remember it better than you did. But behind those sweet text messages and loving phone calls, she was building something much more sinister. A complete fake identity, with fake documents, fake family members, and even fake friends who were all part of her elaborate scheme. And just when her victims thought they couldn't love her more, that's when the real game would begin. Because what you're about to hear next will show you exactly how a predator chooses her prey. And trust me, the way she selected her final target will make you understand why this story is unlike anything you've ever heard before. But first, let me ask you something. How well do you really know the person you're dating? How sure are you that their stories are true? Because after you hear what happened next, you might want to ask a few more questions. Now, here's where this story takes a turn that will make you question everything you think you know about wealth, power, and the games people play. While Sarah, or whatever her real name was busy crafting her perfect victim profile, she had no idea that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her criminal career, because the man she was targeting, he wasn't just another wealthy businessman. He was something much, much more dangerous. Meet David Chen, 42 years old, drives a modest Honda Civic, lives in a simple 2-bedroom apartment, shops at regular grocery stores, and wears clothes from department stores. If you saw him on the street, you'd think he was just another middle-class guy trying to make ends meet. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. David Chen was worth $500 million. $500 million. He was the heir to one of the largest tech fortunes in the country, but he had spent the last 15 years of his life pretending to be completely ordinary. Why would someone with that kind of money choose to live like this? Well, that's a story in itself. After watching his wealthy friends get destroyed by gold diggers, after seeing his own father manipulated and nearly bankrupted by his third wife, David made a decision that would change everything. He created the perfect disguise. He rented a modest apartment, bought a regular car, and built a fake business that made just enough money to seem successful, but not wealthy. He even had fake financial documents showing a net worth of around $2 million. Enough to be attractive to someone like Sarah, but not enough to reveal his true identity. And here's the genius part. He had been doing this for years. Every woman he dated thought they were getting a comfortable, stable guy. Never the billionaire, never the target, never the prize. But Sarah, she was different. She was a professional hunter, and she smelled money from a mile away. She looked at David's watch, a modest Seiko. She saw his apartment, clean but simple. She checked his car, reliable but nothing special. And she thought, perfect. This is exactly the kind of guy who has hidden wealth, but doesn't flaunt it. She was right, but she was also walking into a trap she didn't even know existed. Because while Sarah was busy researching David's fake identity, David was doing something that would change the game forever. He wasn't just a billionaire in disguise. He was a billionaire in disguise who had been burned before, and he had learned to be very, very careful about who he let into his life. But here's what neither of them knew. They were both about to discover that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted, and sometimes the perfect victim is actually the perfect predator. What happens when two people who are both pretending to be someone else fall in love, or think they do? What happens when the lies become so deep that even the liars forget what's real? The answer to that question is about to get very, very complicated. Because what Sarah did next would set in motion a chain of events that would expose secrets neither of them were prepared for. What I'm about to tell you next will make you realize just how far some people are willing to go for money, and I mean A-L-L, the way. 3 months into their relationship, Sarah made a decision that would either make her the richest woman in the country, or destroy her completely. She decided it was time to accelerate her timeline. Because you see, 3 months was already longer than she usually spent with her victims. But David was different. He was careful, methodical, and she could sense there was more money hidden than he was letting on. So Sarah did what she had done twice before with previous victims. She bought a pregnancy test online, but not the kind you're thinking of. She bought a fake E-positive pregnancy test. Yes, those exist, and they're disturbingly easy to get. But Sarah wasn't an amateur. She didn't just show David a plastic stick and call it a day. No. She had learned from her mistakes with victim number 7, who had gotten suspicious and demanded to go to the doctor with her. This time, Sarah had prepared everything. She had fake medical documents, fake ultrasound images that she had purchased from a medical fraud website, and even a fake doctor's appointment confirmation. She had studied pregnancy symptoms for weeks, practiced her emotional reactions in the mirror, and even bought a silicone belly that she could wear under loose clothing. The night she told David, she made sure everything was perfect. Candlelit dinner, his favorite wine, soft music playing in the background, and then, With tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, she showed him the test. David's reaction was exactly what she had hoped for. Shock, then joy, then an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He held her, told her everything would be okay, and promised that they would figure it out together. But here's where Sarah's plan gets absolutely diabolical. Because a fake pregnancy wasn't enough. She needed something more permanent, something that would guarantee her payday, even if her lies were eventually discovered. 2 weeks later, she brought up the subject of what if something happened to one of them. She talked about how dangerous the world was becoming, how many young people were dying in accidents, how important it was to protect their unborn child's future, and David, being the caring man he appeared to be, agreed to update his will. But Sarah had a problem. If she pushed too hard for him to leave everything to her, it would look suspicious. So she played the long game. She suggested they both make wills, leaving everything to each other just in case. She even offered to pay for the lawyer. What David didn't know was that Sarah had already researched estate lawyers in the area. She had found one who, for the right price, would be willing to ask fewer questions than he should. She had found one who would help her make sure that when David died, and yes, she was already planning his death, she would inherit everything, legally and cleanly. The fake pregnancy gave her 9 months to work with, 9 months to convince David to marry her, 9 months to gain access to his finances, 9 months to plan the perfect murder that would look like a tragic accident. But there was one small problem with Sarah's plan. Actually, it was a huge problem. Because while she was busy planning David's death, she had no idea who she was really dealing with. David signed that will, but he also did something else. Something that Sarah would never see coming. Something that would turn her perfect plan into her perfect nightmare. Because you see, when you're dealing with a billionaire who has been hiding his identity for 15 years, you better believe he knows how to protect himself. And David had been protecting himself in ways that Sarah couldn't even imagine. What David did next would expose not just Sarah's lies, but an entire network of criminals that had been operating under everyone's noses for years. And when Sarah realized what was happening, it would already be too late to run. Just when you think this story can't get any more twisted, it does. Because what happened next will make you question every friendship, every relationship, and every person you trust in your life. Remember how I told you that Sarah was a professional? Well, she didn't work alone. No successful criminal ever does. And the way she had built her network of accomplices was absolutely genius and terrifying. 1 month after David signed that will, Sarah introduced him to her best friend Marcus, a charming, funny guy in his 30s, who seemed to genuinely care about Sarah's happiness. Marcus was the kind of friend every couple needs. Supportive, trustworthy, and always ready with great advice about relationships. David liked Marcus immediately. They bonded over sports, shared similar tastes in movies, and Marcus even helped David plan a surprise birthday party for Sarah. Marcus felt like the brother David never had. The kind of friend you call when you need help moving furniture, or when you want to surprise your girlfriend with something special. But here's what will make your blood run cold. Marcus wasn't Sarah's friend. Marcus was her business partner, and for the past 6 years, Marcus had been the invisible hand behind every single one of Sarah's successful cons. While Sarah was busy being the perfect girlfriend, Marcus was doing the dirty work. He was the one hacking into bank accounts. He was the one creating fake documents. He was the one who had access to medical fraud websites, legal document templates, and even contacts at banks who could be bribed to look the other way. But Marcus's most important job? Gaining the victim's complete trust. Because when the time came to execute the final phase of their plan, they would need someone on the inside. Someone the victim trusted completely. Someone who could convince them to make that one final, fatal mistake. And David had no idea that every buyer he shared with Marcus Every laugh they had together, every piece of personal information he revealed. It was all being reported back to Sarah within hours. Marcus knew David's schedule better than David did. He knew which gym David went to, what time he left for work, where he kept his spare key, and even the combination to his home safe, because David had trusted him enough to share it during a casual conversation about home security. But here's where this story takes another shocking turn, because while Marcus was busy playing the perfect friend, David was starting to notice some very strange coincidences, like how Sarah always seemed to know things about his work that he was sure he had never told her, or how she would bring up topics in conversation that he had only discussed with Marcus, or how she always seemed to have solutions to problems that he hadn't even realized he had yet. David's instincts, honed by years of protecting his fortune from gold diggers, were starting to sound alarm bells. But every time he questioned something, Marcus was right there with a perfectly reasonable explanation. "Oh, you told us both that story last week, remember? Or Sarah mentioned you were worried about that, so I thought of a solution." The web of lies was so intricate, so perfectly woven, that even David's suspicious mind couldn't see through it. Marcus and Sarah had perfected this dance over 12 previous victims. They knew exactly how to deflect suspicion, how to make their Mark feel crazy for questioning anything, and how to make themselves seem like the most trustworthy people in the world. But what none of them knew was that David had a secret weapon of his own, something that he had been using to protect himself for years, something that would soon expose not just Marcus and Sarah's partnership, but reveal that this conspiracy went much, much deeper than anyone could have imagined. Because while Sarah thought she was playing the long game, and while Marcus thought he was the puppet master pulling all the strings, David was about to show them what a real professional looks like when his back is against the wall. And when that moment came, the hunters would finally realize they had chosen the wrong prey. But by then, it would be far too late to escape the trap they had walked into. What I'm about to reveal to you next will make you realize that what you thought was just a story about one woman's greed, is actually something much more sinister. Something that operates in the shadows of our connected world, using our trust, our loneliness, and our desire for love against us. Sarah and Marcus weren't just partners, they were part of something bigger, something organized, something that had been operating across 5 different countries for over a decade. Picture this. Right now, as you're listening to this story, there are women just like Sarah in New York, London, Sydney, Toronto, and Zurich. They wake up every morning, check their encrypted messages, and get their assignments for the day. Their job: to find lonely, wealthy men and destroy their lives for profit. This wasn't some small-time operation run out of someone's basement. This was a sophisticated criminal enterprise with a hierarchy, protocols, and a success rate that would make Fortune 500 companies jealous. At the top of this organization was a woman known only as the Widow. No one knew her real name, her real age, or even what country she operated from. But everyone in the network knew her reputation. She had allegedly inherited and stolen over $200 million from 7 different husbands over 15 years. And now, she was teaching other women how to follow in her footsteps. The Widow had created what she called the Academy, a dark web training program where women learned everything from advanced psychology and manipulation techniques to financial fraud, identity theft, and even methods for making a death look accidental. Sarah had graduated from the academy 3 years ago, at the top of her class. She had been personally mentored by the Widow, and had proven herself worthy by successfully completing increasingly difficult assignments. The 12 men she had robbed, those weren't random targets. Those were her final exams. But David was supposed to be her masterpiece, her graduation to the inner circle, because the academy had a special division for their most skilled operatives, the Black Widows, women who didn't just steal from men, women who eliminated them. And here's what will make you sick to your stomach. Sarah wasn't planning to just take David's money and disappear. She was planning to become a real widow. Because a dead husband can't report you to the police, can't testify against you, and can't take back what you've stolen. The network had it all figured out. Swiss bank accounts for money laundering, contacts in 5 different countries for fake documents, and even corrupt officials who could make investigations disappear. They had forensic experts who could make poisoning look like a heart attack, accident specialists who could tamper with cars, and lawyers who specialized in inheritance law. Marcus wasn't just Sarah's partner, he was her handler. Every Black Widow operation was monitored by a handler who made sure the job got done correctly. If Sarah showed any signs of weakness, any hesitation to complete the final phase, Marcus had orders to eliminate both her and the target. But here's the terrifying part. This network was growing. They were recruiting new women every month, training them through online courses that looked like legitimate business seminars. Women who thought they were joining a support group for female entrepreneurs had no idea they were being evaluated for criminal potential. The Widow had created a system so efficient, so well protected, that law enforcement agencies in 5 countries had been trying to infiltrate it for years without success. Every time they got close, the network would disappear, only to resurface months later with new identities and new targets. And Sarah, she was about to become the network's biggest success story, a $500 million score that would set the record for the largest inheritance theft in the organization's history. But there was one small problem with this perfect plan, one tiny detail that the Widow, Sarah, Marcus, and everyone else in their sophisticated criminal network had overlooked. David Chen wasn't just a billionaire hiding his wealth. David Chen was someone with resources, connections, and skills that would soon turn their perfect system into their perfect nightmare. Because while they had been busy planning his death, David had been uncovering their lives, and what he had discovered would not only save his own life, it would bring down an entire criminal empire that had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. The hunters were about to discover what it felt like to become the hunted, and trust me, they were not prepared for what was coming next. Now, here's where this story becomes absolutely mind, because while Sarah thought she was playing chess, David was playing a completely different game, a game where he had been 10 moves ahead from the very beginning. Remember, when I told you that David Chen was a billionaire in disguise? Well, that was only half the truth. Because David wasn't just hiding his wealth, he was hiding his entire identity. For the past 20 years, David Chen had been one of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's most elite undercover agents, specializing in financial crimes and organized criminal networks. He had infiltrated money laundering operations, exposed international fraud rings, and taken down some of the most sophisticated criminals in the world. But 2 years ago, David had retired from active duty to focus on a case that had become personal, a case involving a criminal organization that had been responsible for the deaths of over 30 wealthy men across 5 countries, an organization that the FBI had been trying to infiltrate for 8 years without success, an organization run by someone called the Widow. David's inheritance story, completely fabricated, his modest lifestyle, a perfect cover, his careful approach to relationships, professional training. Every single detail of his life had been designed to attract exactly the kind of criminal he was hunting. And when Sarah appeared in his life, checking all the boxes of a professional con artist, David knew he had finally found his way into the network he'd been chasing for years. But here's the genius part. David hadn't just been passively waiting for Sarah to make her move. He had been actively investigating her from day one. While she was busy researching his fake financial records, he was using FBI resources to uncover her real identity, her criminal history, and her connection to previous victims. He knew about Marcus before Sarah even introduced them. He knew about the fake pregnancy before she bought the test. He knew about the Swiss bank accounts, the document forgery operation, and even the location of the Academy's training servers. But David needed more than just evidence of their crimes. He needed to expose the entire network, and the only way to do that was to let Sarah and Marcus believe they were winning. While he gathered intelligence on every single person involved in their organization, so David played the perfect victim. He signed the will that Sarah wanted. He shared personal information with Marcus P. He even helped plan his own fake murder, because every detail Sarah and Marcus discussed was being recorded by FBI surveillance equipment hidden throughout his apartment. For 6 months, David had been feeding information to a joint task force involving the FBI, Interpol, and law enforcement agencies in 4 other countries. They were building the most comprehensive case against an international criminal network in modern history. But then, something happened that David hadn't planned for. Something that would change everything and put his entire operation at risk. He started to have feelings for Sarah. Not the real Sarah, of course, but the version of herself that she had created for him. The kind, caring, loving woman who brought him coffee in the morning and listened to his problems at night. The woman who laughed at his jokes and made him feel less alone in the world. David knew it was all fake. He knew every kiss was calculated. Every I love you was part of her script. But after 20 years of living alone, pretending to be someone else, never allowing himself to form real connections, a part of him wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, some of it was real, and that emotional vulnerability, that moment of human weakness. It almost cost him everything, because while David was questioning his feelings, Sarah and Marcus were finalizing their plan for his murder. And the method they had chosen was so sophisticated, so perfectly designed to look like an accident, that even David's FBI training might not be enough to save him. The network had given Sarah a final deadline: eliminate the target within 72 hours, or face elimination herself. The widow was getting impatient, and Marcus had orders to complete the job with or without Sarah's cooperation. David was about to discover that sometimes, even the most carefully planned undercover operation can spiral out of control. And sometimes, the line between predator and prey becomes so blurred that you can't tell who's hunting who anymore. What happened next would determine not just David's survival, but the fate of an entire criminal empire that had been operating in the shadows for over a decade. And trust me, the final confrontation between these two master manipulators would be unlike anything you could ever imagine. This is it, the moment you've been waiting for. The night that would determine who was the real predator and who was the prey. It was David's birthday. Sarah had spent weeks planning the perfect celebration. A romantic dinner at their apartment, his favorite meal, expensive wine, and a dessert that would be his last. Because hidden in that beautiful chocolate cake were enough oleander toxins to stop a man's heart within 30 minutes, and leave no trace that would be detected in a standard autopsy. Sarah had learned this technique at the academy. The widow herself had used it on husband number 3. The symptoms would look exactly like a heart attack brought on by excitement and rich food. The perfect end to a perfect con. But as Sarah lit the candles on that poisoned cake, she had no idea that David had already replaced every ingredient in her kitchen with harmless substitutes. The FBI's forensic team had been in and out of that apartment 6 times over the past month, documenting everything and ensuring David's safety. David walked into that dining room, knowing he was about to eat a meal that was supposed to kill him, but he also knew that in exactly 47 minutes, federal agents positioned around the building would receive his signal and move in to arrest the entire network. Sarah looked beautiful that night. She was wearing the dress he had bought her for their first anniversary. She was smiling, that perfect smile that had fooled 12 men before him, and as she handed him the first bite of cake, she told him she loved him. For a moment, David almost believed her, but then Marcus arrived, right on schedule. He had been watching from the building across the street, waiting for the poison to take effect. When David didn't collapse after 20 minutes, Marcus knew something had gone wrong. That's when the perfect plan started to unravel. Marcus burst through the apartment door with a gun, screaming at Sarah for screwing up the job. Sarah, realizing that David was still alive and alert, knew their cover was blown, and David finally dropped his act and revealed who he really was. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," he said, showing his badge. "You're both under arrest." But the story doesn't end there. Because what happened next was bigger than anyone could have imagined. The arrest of Sarah and Marcus triggered a coordinated international operation involving over 200 federal agents across 5 countries. Within 6 hours, they had arrested 47 members of the Widows Network, seized 89 bank accounts containing over $50 million in stolen funds, and shut down the largest inheritance fraud operation in modern history. But the real shock came when they finally identified the widow herself. She wasn't some mysterious criminal mastermind operating from a foreign country. She was a 62-year-old woman named Margaret Phillips, living in a mansion in Connecticut, who had been running her criminal empire while serving on the boards of 3 different charities and hosting garden parties for the local elite. The Academy. It was being operated out of a building in downtown Manhattan that was officially registered as a women's empowerment center. The Swiss bank accounts were managed by a respected financial firm that had no idea they were laundering money for murderers. Sarah broke down completely when she realized the scope of what had been exposed. She confessed to everything, provided detailed information about every victim, and helped investigators recover millions of dollars that had been stolen over the past decade. Marcus tried to cut a deal by revealing the locations of 3 bodies that had been buried in different states. Men who had refused to sign over their assets and had been eliminated as loose ends. And David, after 22 years of undercover work, after risking his life to expose one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in history, he finally retired for real. The case had been his masterpiece, but it had also shown him something he hadn't expected to find, that he was tired of living a lie. Even for justice, today, Sarah is serving a life sentence without parole for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud. Marcus got the death penalty for his role in multiple homicides. The widow died in federal custody while awaiting trial, though some investigators believe she was eliminated by remaining members of her network to keep their identities secret, and the $50 million recovered from their operation. It was returned to the families of victims, including the widows and children of men who had been murdered for their money. David made sure that every penny went back to the people who had been destroyed by this network of predators. But here's what should terrify you about this story. Investigators believe they only caught about 60% of the Widows Network. There are still women out there, right now, using the techniques they learned at the Academy. Still men being targeted, manipulated, and robbed by professionals who have turned romance into the deadliest weapon imaginable. So the next time you meet someone who seems too good to be true, the next time someone appears in your life, at just the right moment, with just the right words, ask yourself, what do they really want? And more importantly, what are you worth to them? Because in a world where love can be faked, identities can be stolen, and death can be disguised as an accident, the only thing more dangerous than trusting the wrong person is never trusting anyone at all. If this story has left you speechless, if it's made you question everything you thought you knew about modern romance and the lengths people will go for money, then smash that like button and let me know in the comments what shocked you the most. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I've got more incredible true stories that will make you see the world in a completely different way. And remember, in a world full of predators disguised as perfect partners, the most important thing you can do is stay alert, stay smart, and never forget that sometimes the person trying to save you might be the most dangerous one of all.